happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Your ratings will go down.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Allison Kahn, filling in for Ann Northrop.
Allison Kahn, longtime lesbian activist. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. First, thanks so much for having me on the show today. So happy to be here. I started my activism 15 years ago at a little place called Dyke TV, public access cable show, with Ann Northrop, who was host at the time. Worked for a variety of LGBTQ media outlets, the ACLU, the now defunct Empire State Pride Agenda, and I've written for every outlet you can imagine on LGBTQ issues, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, BuzzFeed, and Elle Magazine most recently.
And now you're going to help us get through this hellacious week in the news. Yeah, last week we said it was a hellacious week. This week turned out to be infinitely worse.
It did. In news this week, we'll talk about the U.S. Senate, which confirmed out lesbian judge and two less friendly men who say they won't support Brown v. Board of Education.
Mike Pence spoke to an anti-gay group of activists, and he told them to get down on their knees.
He did. Good news from the Utah Supreme Court, the Washington State House of Representatives, and the governor of North Carolina.
Also good news in Salt Lake City, where Catholics are fighting the placement of an anti-LGBT priest being imposed on them.
And a children's hospital for trans kids opens in Akron, Ohio.
I wonder how Mario Lopez feels about that. LGBT issues continue to roil politics in Poland.
And not too far away, Russian officials arrest gay demonstrators in St. Petersburg, but rockers defy the anti-gay laws at a Moscow concert.
And I'm going to review Coriolanus in the Park, which you only have until this weekend to see, and Moulin Rouge on Broadway, which may run forever. Okay, in the news, well, what a week. All over the news, of course, were the massacres in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio. Apparently the 250th mass shooting in the United States just this year.
You know, words like travesty just don't do enough to describe, the action, the swift and immediate action that needs to take place to prevent these from happening in the future. 31 people killed, dozens more injured.
Well, there was a headline in the Times saying, Americans are bewildered over this. I'm not bewildered over this. I know what to do. You do what Australia did. You do what New Zealand did. You ban assault weapons in private hands, period. You're already not allowed to have a Tommy gun. You're not allowed to build bombs. So these things, which can take so much life so fast, and this is what we have to do. But there are millions of them out there. Buy them back. Get rid of them. No one should have them.
Yeah, the numbers are clear, right? Before, in 1994 to 2004, when we banned assault weapons, there were fewer deaths by way of assault weapons. It's pretty clear. And
in El Paso, of course, it was a white nationalist targeting Latinx people, some folks said this was the largest attack on Latinx people, mass shooting. Of course, the Pulse massacre killed even more. And then in Dayton, how do you describe this kid? Kellyanne Conway wants to say he has left-wing leanings, but he was sort of one of these incel types. You've read about these guys.
Yeah.
They can't get a date. They hate women because they can't get a date. And you've read what a horrible person he is. But whatever they are, they shouldn't have weapons of mass destruction, etc.
Or violent video games, according to some critics.
It's crazy. Now, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas came along and called the attack disgusting and intolerable and not Texan. Are you kidding? You're an open carry state, Governor. You're the one who's disgusting. allowing that kind of thing. You promote the worship of guns over people. It's not, and of course, he's a guy who stokes bigotry himself in many cases. Just last couple of weeks ago, we're reporting on, to celebrate the fact that we're going to install Chick-fil-A in an airport, we're going to sit there and eat Chick-fil-A, and don't tell us, what kind of food can be served by bigoted companies in our airports, right?
It was a real slap in the face,
Yeah.
And Texas, no less, in the next few months, their gun laws will actually change to make them even looser. And so weapons will be allowed in places like daycare and schools, places of worship. So.
Well, nobody feels safe, but the group that always responds to these things is Gays Against Guns. They were in Times Square this week. There's a guy holding up a sign about what it was all about. If you can put that up there. Gays Against Guns went to Times Square on, I believe it was on Sunday, the day of the thing, Dayton and El Paso. And then look, they got a huge crowd out there in the middle of Times Square. And then, of course, a couple of days later, what happened?
Yeah, just yesterday, a motorcycle backfired in Times Square, and moral panic ensued, and everybody, ran and ducked for cover.
I just think it was pure panic. People were running into theaters. They're disrupting performances of Hamilton and what's the other one? Come on, Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird.
They
were running into these theaters. They had to stop the shows. But because we're all on edge.
We are. It's a scary time.
Now, it was nice to see Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, who appeared at one of these vigils, get heckled. Do something. Do something. Do something. Now, he says he's going to. He's a Republican, right-winger, but we'll see. But what about that other Ohio state representative?
Yeah, not every Ohio rep is on the right side of history there. So Candace Keller has been making headlines for her salacious Facebook post, which she later deleted, where she blames a laundry list of entities for the shootings, including the breakdown of traditional American family values. And she thanks transgender, homosexual marriage, and drag queen advocates. The list goes on and on.
Marijuana smoking.
She even blames recreational marijuana, people who hate our veterans, the entire Democratic Congress, the culture, whatever that means, and snowflakes.
Well, yeah. But the GOP chair, a woman named Jane Murphy Timken, called on her to, the chair of the Republican Party in the state, called on her to resign.
Yeah, members of her own party have called her out as inappropriate. She refuses, for now. She refuses. If we maintain public pressure on her, who knows?
And of course, essentially, what we're trying to press the Democrats in Congress to do is to rid us of Donald Trump as well, by bringing impeachment hearings, by getting this over with. It's intolerable. I mean, he is behind, of course, the rhetoric that drives these things up. We lost Toni Morrison this week. She talked about words carrying violence, and his words certainly do as well.
Absolutely, and he's traveling today to Dayton and El Paso, and has been met with protests along the way.
Right.
So
people are not going to be just polite about all this. They're going to do something. Okay.
I sure hope so.
All right. Some more Trump news. You may be shocked to learn that they confirmed an out lesbian to be a federal judge.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have a terrible background, does she?
No, Mary Rowland, Illinois. She's got an impressive record, has worked for advocacy organizations, and is the first LGBT,
ACLU,
including the ACLU. Yes, she's the first LGBT Trump judicial nominee that has been confirmed by the Senate. There's one other, Patrick Bumate in California, in a U.S. District Court for the Southern District of California, who has yet to be confirmed, but who has been nominated by Trump. So one confirmed finally, and maybe one or two more on the docket out of the 146 judicial picks that the Senate has confirmed under Trump so far.
Well, but the bad guys, continue to be confirmed, including Jeffrey Brown for the Southern District of Texas and Brantley Starr to the Northern District. These are dedicated anti-gay activists. They, in their hearings, they no longer they're given a softball. What do you think about Brown v. Board of Education? I don't want to comment on that. I don't want to comment on desegregation in the United States. And they were confirmed.
It's
scary.
It's very scary. It's very scary.
Yeah. All right. Mike Pence had a hell of a week. He appeared with first of all, he appeared with the anti-LGBT extremist Eric Erickson, who has compared us to child rapists and Nazis, us LGBT people. And he says that the Equality Act will ban Christianity. And he's also very anti-trans, but Mike was happy to appear with him.
Yeah, 3 appearances this week with staunchly anti-LGBTQ, anti-equality groups, including the ADF, and which he said his famous line.
The ADF is Alliance Defending Freedom, which is their legal group.
Which brings a lot of the cases to bear that work their way up to the Supreme Court.
And what did Mike have to say to them?
So when asked how he handles all of the criticism he gets for being religious and anti-LGBTQ, he says, quote, better to spend time on my knees than on the internet.
Are you trying to tell us something, Mike? It's pathetic. He also said forgiveness is a great gift, but I don't see any forgiveness coming from them. More on Trump. He's got new regulations to remove anti-discrimination protections from the Affordable Care Act. We've told you about this. This is targeting LGBTQ patients, especially transgender patients. The public comment period on this ends on August the 12th. So, how much good does it do to weigh in on these things? Go to the website and do it. You can go to HRC, humanrightscampaign.org. They have it set up so that you can make your comment by August 12th. It's all being pushed by this guy named Roger Severino, who was the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Health and Human Services. He's a longtime anti-LGBT activist. So go to hrc.org, fill out their form, tell them at least,
And just to be clear, this is a specific rollback from the Obama era ACA rule known as Section 1557, and it prohibits gender identification, discrimination, and sex stereotyping, and specifically for groups who really are most vulnerable. So it impacts Medicaid, it impacts the all-inclusive care for the elderly. Really important that we don't lose this gain.
And so the Trump people say, well, we're just enforcing the real law, and the law covers sex, it doesn't cover sexual orientation, it doesn't cover gender identity, even though there are many court precedents that do. And that, of course, is going to be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States. They're going to hear the case on October the 8th.
That's
Do you have more on that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so it's a consolidation of several cases that have been working their way through the lower courts, and the Supreme Court has agreed to hear the cases. The timing isn't great, right? We don't have a Supreme Court configuration that could build on the precedent that we've heard in the lower courts, which have recognized LGBTQ identities as an extension of Title VII from the original Civil Rights Act of 1964. But we are proceeding as we need to, and we'll know by spring into summer 2020 how that consolidated case goes.
Well, we're not optimistic, but it should be possible. You mentioned sex stereotyping, which is covered under the Civil Rights Act under sex stereotyping. You're not fulfilling a proper sex role. I mean, a woman who comes in wearing pants or something, or, a man who wears a colorful shirt, or I don't know, whatever. Even Scalia said that's covered under sex discrimination. So,
yeah, this case has ramifications well beyond just those who might identify as LGBTQ.
Okay. In the U.S. House, 30 members have urged the acting ICE director to stop the mistreatment of transgender detainees at the border. Told you about ones who have died.
Yep.
There's one who's been there since 2017 seeking asylum.
worth noting that that the vast majority, 88% of LGBTQ asylum seekers have experienced violence, and in particular of the waves of people coming into the country right now, the Northern Triangle, as it's called, the Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, there's larger concentrations of anti-LGBTQ violence.
Well, they get murdered there, they get murdered, and they get murdered here, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. All right, let's shift a little bit. When we taped last week, Chris Cooper and I talked about the first Democratic debate, but let's talk about where this is with the 22 for how many candidates for the Democratic nomination. It is a bit of a joke. Anybody can run. I wish you would all get together and sit down and say, let's all get behind somebody. But what were some of your impressions coming out of that?
You know, I was unimpressed, which I hate to say.
By our candidates?
I was unimpressed, not by the candidates, because I think each into their own, there are impressive qualities and platforms. I was unimpressed, perhaps because of the format, right? You've got so many people speaking at once. The sound bites are short. The time is short. Everybody gets cut off. I didn't hear one sound bite that, that made the hair stand up on my arm, right? There were.
Except for Pete Buttigieg. He turned to the camera, I got a picture of him, and he spoke to Republicans, and he said, when the sun sets on your career, and they're writing, and they are writing about your story, of all the good and bad things you did in your life, the thing that you will be most remembered for is whether you found the courage to stand up to him, meaning Trump. He also accused the NRA of creating a false god out of guns. So that's the kind of stuff I want to hear. Yeah. Take him on. Don't take each other on. Look, you want to show a contrast with you, but the way, and I will say, Kamala Harris started this, and she got her zinger in with Biden, and and in the first debate, and it's like if they're just writing talking points for the Republicans at this point. So contrast yourselves. I would start everything by saying, look, the differences among us all here is minimal compared to what we've got now. Here's some differences. Say it kindly.
And there were those moments, right? Warren and Booker in particular stand out to me as the ones who did sort of a check and a checkpoint and said, look, I would support anybody on this stage, right, over Trump, and let's be in this together. And I think there was a lot of air spent on those sort of comments and the nitpicking, and frankly, I think everybody was picking on Biden, for better or worse. So the commentary on whether I think it was deserved or not aside.
We are not promoting a particular candidate.
We are not. But I think at the end of the day, we need the affirmative. We need, the Obama, of the people. We need somebody who can inspire people.
Yes, that exactly. We need to. You need to show that you are our hope, and it's not going to be done by tearing down other Democrats. Lucian Truscott, a longtime journalist, he wrote a story about Stonewall when it happened for the Village Voice. Not gay, but he said the Democratic National Committee needs to take these debates back from these people at the cable networks who are just using them for ratings, run them themselves, let the press cover it, and use them as forums to get people's platforms out.
I love that idea. Yeah. And that's sort of the trend in general, right, of owned media. You run stuff on your own channels under your own volition. Yeah. Okay. I would say, like all the candidates said, about voting whoever the Democratic candidate is, Democrat 2020 is for me, or even a ficus plant.
Elizabeth Warren took a special stand this week, didn't she?
She did. She spoke up on behalf of a tragic event, the death of a trans woman in Rikers Island, calling for the end of solitary confinement in our prisons.
Right, we have a picture there of Layleen,
Her name is Layleen Kubelet Polanco.
Couldn't afford $500 for bail, was left to rot in Rikers, was not given proper medical attention, and died. And Warren called this cruel and unusual punishment. Now, de Blasio, who was the mayor of New York, where Rikers Island says we've reduced solitary confinement, but we're not going to end it. Well, we do need to end it.
We absolutely need to end it. There's no more senseless deaths.
Now, this week, Kamala Harris, this is interesting. Kamala Harris and Cory Booker were called out for attending services at the Las Vegas Missionary Baptist Church of Reverend Robert Fowler, who lumps homosexuals in with adulterers, fornicators, and other sexual sins. Now, of course, almost every religion, major religion, does this. You can't, I mean, how do you go to a church and not have it be an anti-gay church? There are a few, but they're the minority, growing, but it's changing. And Sanders apparently had a town hall at his church. Even Fowler says, well, I don't think gay rights is going to be a major issue this year for us, but this is, it's perilous. You know, they want to be seen with these religious leaders, but very few are pro-gay.
So I think it's interesting because I don't see it as all bad that some of our pro-LGBT officials are meeting with the sort of the old guard anti-LGBTQ. I think that's how you open the door to conversation. And I think maybe it's the optimism in me, but once you put some humanity into the conversation and faces and names, there's an opportunity to talk about shifting your opinion. So
well,
I don't know if the Catholic Church is going to budge anytime soon, but I would say, you know, especially given the divided nature of our country right now, opening doors and having conversations is not all a bad thing.
Well, if anybody was optimistic this week, it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's at a vigil over the shootings, and she says, I want to address this to the white supremacists out there. There is a mother waiting for you. I know it. I know there's a teacher waiting for you saying, what happened to my kid? What happened to my friend? And we will always be here and hold space for you to come back. We will love you back. You are not too far gone. Wow, that she would say this at a vigil for these people, that she would say this. I kind of think of what Bayard Rustin used to say, the black gay civil rights leader. Don't waste your time on the 5% or 10% of people who are never going to agree with you. You know, work on the movable middle. We have this whole group of 40% of Trump supporters we sort of see as immovable, but are they? Are they immovable?
If we've got the
what would open their eyes?
If we've got the impassioned character, I don't know. That's the billion-dollar question, right? What
do you think the scales can be lifted from their eyes?
Yes.
You do.
I do.
I want to focus on people who didn't vote last time and see if we can attract them. And that's why I want the Democrats to be more positive in their approaches. They should be as negative as they want on Trump.
Yes.
And that was a turning point this week. They all just let loose and said he's a racist dog, and he's the source of a lot of these problems. They're not, you know, mincing words. See, Trump doesn't, you know, and then what was his name? Kevin McCarthy, who's the Republican leader, he said, what happened to they go low, we go high? Well, we're not going to play that game anymore with them. You know,
we can't. It's like speaking two different languages, and as the world is on fire, right? So we need to try to put the fire out. And
we need to flip the Senate, and it needs to be talked about more. If we don't, it's very hard because a lot of these small states, we have to get some flips, and the states where the action is are Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Iowa, Kentucky, Maine, North Carolina, and Texas. If you live in any of those places, we hope you are deeply involved in a Senate campaign. All right, where are we? Okay.
Should we talk about Utah? So switching gears a little bit, sort of in that part of the country where some of the states you mentioned are. Utah finally, after 2 years, moved to make surrogacy legal for same-sex couples.
Yeah, we lost a couple of decisions, but we got a better decision, a good decision from the Supreme Court of Utah.
Finally, in a 75-page decision, the sticking point that prevented same-sex couples from having legal families through gestational surrogacy was the title intended mother in the original language of the bill.
Yeah, and that's what the lower court judges said. But the Chief Justice, and we had his picture up there, or we do have it up there, he said same-sex couples must be afforded all of the benefits the state has linked to marriage and freely grants to opposite-sex couples. And even the Utah Attorney General did not oppose this approach in the court.
Yeah.
So
it's great. They cited Obergefell, and the marriage case continues to pay dividends in terms of extending, new and important equal rights to same-sex families.
as long as we're in Utah, why don't we talk about those Catholics in Salt Lake City? So poor St. Ambrose Church, right? They lost one priest because he tried to go with a sex worker. It turned out to be a cop, so he was off.
Didn't work out well for him.
He got fined, and they had to pay a fine and take an HIV test. But he didn't admit guilt. But they're more upset with a guy named the Reverend Eric Ricksteig, who is being assigned to them. But on Facebook, he's been promoting hate of LGBT groups, mocking women. And he's going to be in charge of the weekly mass for their kids. And so 150 parents in this parish and in the school said, we don't want him. And, the bishop keeps saying, oh, he'll be all right. He's really not that bad. God, you must be desperate.
Add to the
He's
list.
scaring people.
He's pro-assault weapons as well.
Oh, yeah, there's a picture of himself with an assault weapon online firing at something.
It's the perfect person to put in front of 4 to 15-year-olds every Sunday for church.
It is just unfathomable.
But,
priests didn't do that in my day. All right, other states.
There was no Facebook in your day, Andy.
Well, that's true. Other states.
Other states, California, not too far from Utah on the left coast, they have for the last few years had a travel ban in place to prevent state tax dollars being used for people to travel to anti-LGBT states.
Yes,
states
we gave them a lot of credit. We reported all these things. New York does this. A lot of states do this. But what happened?
A new report came out showing that there are plenty of entities going around that law using private funds to travel to the states that have staunchly anti-LGBT laws in place.
Yes, legislators who want to do it are using campaign funds.
Yep.
Schools are raising private money so their teams can go to these states.
Yep.
It's not in the spirit of the thing, is it?
It's not, but in a way it is, because they recognize that it's harder for them to do it, and there is a conscience check at the point in which they have to raise and spend those funds. So
you are a very positive person.
Today, ask me tomorrow, maybe not.
And
this is optimistic news, Allison.
And it was nice to see Governor Newsom out there in California extend domestic partner benefits to what I call sex discordant couples. They started domestic partnerships for gay couples. A lot of states took them away when they got married. New York didn't. New York City. New York State never had them. So this bill passed the Assembly 60-0, so I guess it was not controversial.
It's all in the spirit of inclusivity, right? Not everybody wants to get married.
And how about North Carolina?
North Carolina, great progress there. What a 180 from just a few years ago, right, in North Carolina.
They still have a terrible legislature.
They do. But thankfully, Governor Roy Cooper is less terrible, and he just signed an executive order that bans conversion therapy in the state. Now, 18 states and Washington, D.C. We've got great momentum on this bill that protects LGBTQ youth from this very harmful, outdated practice.
And the issue is you can't get reimbursed from the state or Medicaid or anything like that for doing conversion. You want to do it on your own. You can do it. You got free speech. Go ahead and do it. Although I think in New Jersey and New York we're starting to define it as consumer fraud. So that's more of a problem.
Yeah. So it doesn't address the religious leaders and other institutions that may still be doing this practice, but it does, put an X in the box for professional psychological workers, and it sends a strong message to parents who might be thinking about sending their kid.
Good news from Washington State. Lori Jenkins from Tacoma in the legislature there was elected Speaker of the House. Now, this is a legislature where a majority of the Democrats are women. And she's the first woman, and she's the first out lesbian or out gay person at all to be the Speaker there. Not the first in the country, but that's a breakthrough.
That is huge. Let's see that happen elsewhere now, too. Pittsburgh, there was a heated meeting where they met to discuss the treatment of trans people in jail.
Well, this was the jail oversight board, right?
Yes. Yes, and the discussion got so heated that they ended up having to shut it down.
Well, the chair of the thing got upset. He's trying to run a meeting, and he's not dealing with it. So trans people who were there to try to get better treatment for trans people start shouting, and he just shuts it down, walks out, storms out of the meeting, ordered it ended. They arrested an activist named Jora Thomas, but sometimes you got to disrupt things to get attention.
Absolutely.
And then there's been, but there's better news for trans people from Akron, Ohio. We told you about this, but now it's finally opened. Children's Hospital opened its Center for Gender Affirming Medicine. It will offer hormone therapy and see children 7 and older. It will help them align with their gender identities, including pubertal suppression. They're going to see the parents as well for counseling. 60 patients have signed up this far. How does Mario Lopez feel about that?
Well, hopefully by now, Mario Lopez is a bit more educated on the issue of trans kids and gender nonconforming
But what
kids.
happened with Mario?
So Mario was on conservative talk show and said that when referencing celebrities who let their kids self-identify their gender, that it was weird and inappropriate and potentially dangerous to do so. He was subsequently ripped a new one by the general public, it's fair to say, and has since apologized, though there is still conversation that he may be taken off the air and no longer a host on Access Hollywood.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, he went on the Candace Owens show. She's a very notable right winger. But Mario says he's an ardent supporter of the LGBT community, and Owens is running something called the Blexit campaign to get African Americans to leave the Democratic Party. Blexit, they call it. All right.
No words.
Now, did you tell me, speaking of trans people, that the perpetrator in the Capital One security breach was a trans woman?
Yes, and a very strange story about a 33-year-old who was a software engineer, worked for Amazon. Name of Paige Thompson was actually the one responsible for the 100 million pieces of personal information breached by Capital One. She found a weakness in their system and a vulnerability. And strangely, the police were able to track her down with her home address because just days prior, she lost her cat and was terribly distraught about the loss of her cat. Posted a letter from the veterinary clinic, sending their condolences about the loss of her cat, and it had her address on the letter. So police were able to track her down.
So a very good computer hacker, but not very bright in other respects.
That's correct. And maybe it's posited she may have gotten her inspiration from the Wachowski sisters, who did a Netflix film about a trans hacker.
Right. Well, here's an interesting case in Oregon. A trans woman, Christina Ketchum, 59 years old, is suing her insurance company with the help of National Center for Lesbian Rights for not covering doctor-recommended facial surgery as part of her transition. She's saying, all right, you worked with my plumbing a bit, and covered some of that, but if I look like this and I can't get, things feminized a bit in my face, it's going to be very hard for me to be a woman, or to be accepted as a woman. So.
Yeah, it's sort of the natural evolution, I think, of inclusive healthcare. So, it used to be the case, and still is the case in some states and some health insurance companies, that what is considered medically necessary care for trans people, like hormone treatment,
right,
like bottom surgery, have historically not been covered. Increasingly, they thankfully are being covered. And now, what is considered cosmetic surgery might be, feminization, facial reconstruction, or other things. So the fight continues to try to get full coverage for trans people.
If you care about all these issues, there is going to be a national trans visibility march. It is set for Saturday, September 28th. before you start yelling. They found out that it was the Jewish holiday and they're sorry, but they feel like they're stuck with the date, so they're going to stream the thing. But it's going to start at 9:30 in the morning in DC's Freedom Plaza, march to the U.S. Capitol, and they're going to plan another one in 2020, hopefully not on a Jewish holiday, to coincide with the U.S. election.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in this, go to transmarchondc.org.
And this is the first ever transgender rights march in DC, and in part hosted by the Human Rights Campaign, who is shifting winds starting today with the ushering in of their new president, Alfonso David.
Yes, who has been a guest on the show when he used to work at Lambda.
That's right.
And then he worked for Governor Cuomo for many years as his counsel, worked on a lot of LGBT issues. If you're watching, Alfonso, we would love to have you in as a guest. Talk about what you're going to bring to this organization. Yeah.
And of note, he is the first African-American president of HRC in 40 years of their history.
Right.
So hopefully good things to come.
Right. Worse news in the transgender community. Kiki Fantroy, 21 years old, 21 black trans woman in Miami, fatally shot last week multiple times. Her mother is pleading for justice. You know, this is an example of more gun violence. It's the 13th such killing of trans women this year in the United States that we know about. And then also in the District of Columbia, a trans woman named Alicia Love was assaulted at a DC gas station just after leaving work.
Yeah, hate crimes continue to go up.
But in Georgia, now the third suspect has been arrested in the murder of a gay man, Trey Peters. We have a picture of Trey, who was murdered back on June the 4th, just walking home from work. Also, 28 years old in DeKalb County. Masked gunmen used anti-gay slurs, robbed, shot. Arrested were Joshua Ellis, a woman named Shalia. Most of these things are done by men, and Tyrese Johnson. He was arrested July 31st for armed robbery and felony murder. Okay.
Of note, a recent study just came out from the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at the California State University, citing, they looked at 30 different cities around the country and found that hate crimes are up 9% year over year. And that is with overall crime actually on the decline.
This is all hate crime or just anti-LGBT?
All hate crime. And they showed in the top, it's a fifth increase in 5 years in hate crimes. First, the top most frequent hate crimes are against African Americans, 23.5%.
Wow. Then
followed by Jews, 21.5%, followed by LGBTQ at 13%.
That sounds like the Charlottesville rally. And of course, their main cheerleader of those fine people, the President of the United States, we of course are being extremely ironic. It's hateful. It's awful. You know, you count on people to put a lid on these things, not to exacerbate them, but that's what we have in the White House.
Well, right, when you've got leaders who are meeting with anti-LGBT groups and hate groups, you know, what are you going to get?
And even when they try to do something nice for us, like the New York Mets, they're going to have their Pride Night again on August 10th. A lot of Major League Baseball teams do this. But now the foul poles at Citi Field, where the Mets play, are adorned with Chick-fil-A ads. And I was very distressed to read that Chick-fil-A is now the most liked brand of fast food. Not necessarily the biggest company, but the most liked brand of. I won't try that fried chicken.
No, it is. Hate chicken is just not worth it.
It is not.
It's not worth it. And you know, as a Queens native, I'm naturally a Mets fan, and I was disheartened to hear not only that Chick-fil-A will be prominently displayed in advertising at the stadium on Pride Night, but the Mets' response was really less.
What did they say?
They didn't say much, actually. They didn't say anything. And if you look at their website, they don't have Pride Night listed. And the giveaway is, it's something that has nothing to do with LGBTQ. So they're really,
Mets.
yeah.
Let's go, Mets.
Yeah, let's go, Mets.
All right. Well, staying in Queens, you know, we celebrated the victory of Tiffany Caban, a woman who describes herself as a queer Latina, as the district attorney Democratic nominee in Queens. She won by 1,100 votes on election night. But it's all gone through a process. So they denied a lot of her ballots by saying people didn't fill them out properly. So it's gone to Melissa Katz, who was the current borough president of Queens, and I was very sad to see that happen. We told you about the guy in Orange City, Iowa, who burned children's books with LGBT themes. Well, the DA prosecuted him and argued for a $625 fine, and they gave him the least fine possible, $65. $65, he's going to do it again. Now, the library was inundated with donations of 1,000 books and $3,700, but this guy's got to be stopped. He's dangerous.
We should call it Fahrenheit 65.
Yeah. You get that reference, folks? Look it up. Okay. 451 would be the title, right?
That's correct.
Ray Bradbury?
Yes, that's Ray Bradbury. Okay. Good read for our apocalyptic times, actually.
Yes, indeed. Fascist times. Fascist times.
Friendly fascism is the term that Robert McChesney used.
I don't think it's so friendly these days.
It's less friendly and more fascist these days. That's correct. Yeah.
Shall we move to anything else on the national scene?
No, I think we're ready to move on to the international scene.
All right, let's see where we are. Well, we talk about Russia a lot. Let's start with some good news from Russia. The group called Rammstein, their guitarists, Richard Cruz and Paul Landers, they kissed on the stage at Luzhniki Stadium, defying Russia's anti-LGBT laws that Oliver Stone thinks are sensible and has not backtracked on that.
No.
So good on these guys.
And Russia, in less exciting news, though hopeful in terms of justice, has arrested somebody who they claim was the person who killed LGBT activist Yelena Grigorieva.
Yes, they arrested one guy and then they said he didn't do it, and now they've arrested somebody else. They're still trying to say it's somebody who had a drink with her, rather than someone who was motivated by this website that listed her, slotted her for death.
Yeah, that's a bit suspect. And Russia also is removing children who are adopted by same-sex parents. It started with a young boy who went to the emergency room for pneumonia, and upon further investigation by the medical staff, when they asked the child about his parents, he mentioned he had two dads. They subsequently removed the child from the home.
And the Trump administration is trying to enable Christian agencies to only deny gay parents the right to adopt. And where does that leave gay kids also, who need adoption?
It's absolutely true. They issued a waiver to a ministry group in South Carolina that now is allowed to only place children in homes of Christian parents.
Yeah, they can discriminate against Jews too.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
And they're thinking of extending that.
It's un-American.
Absolutely is, and just immoral for the 400,000 children in foster care who need homes. Speaking
of immoral and staying in Russia, in St. Petersburg, 11 activists were detained because they had an unauthorized pride event. 3 were taken away in an ambulance. They're invoking the anti-LGBT propaganda law, again, that Oliver Stone thinks is so sensible. But 50 activists showed up to do this, and they were encircled by troops.
Putin told the Financial Times that LGBTQ people must not be allowed to overshadow the culture, traditions, and traditional family values of millions of people making up the core population.
He's such a, well, I could use a bad word, but he's, this is the way they stay in power. And this is the way the party in Poland is trying to stay in power.
Do you know what I find ironic is that as we look at trends around marriage, right, divorce rates are up. People are choosing not to get married. In Japan, women are having weddings for themselves without a partner.
They're marrying themselves.
They're marrying themselves.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Yeah. People are having children in fewer numbers, especially in countries like the U.S. and Japan and other industrialized nations. And yet,
we need immigration.
We absolutely do need immigration to keep us all fueled and going and competitive for the workforce. We also need LGBTQ people. We're the ones, actually, who are increasingly upholding family values. We're just starting to get married.
You're
and
a
have
mom. You're a
kids.
mom yourself.
I am a mom.
How's that going?
It's exhausting and amazing. I have a 2-year-old, and he's the reason I fight every day for equality in this world, right? So that he can grow up to both be an advocate, to use his privilege for good to help others, and so that he has a world to grow up in.
Again, I admire your optimism. I do. But I'm both discouraged and discouraged by stuff going on in Poland. So the Catholic Church there is doubling down on anti-LGBT rhetoric, along with the ruling nationalist party there that is trying to use anti-gay stuff to get reelected. The Archbishop of Krakow said Poland was under siege from a rainbow plague. It's very Trumpian language, the kind that breeds violence. Yeah. An out gay politician there, Robert Biedron, said that these are the kinds of inflammatory statements that lead to genocide. And his progressive party, Wiosna, is pro-LGBT. But what's happened as a result of this is tens of thousands of people on Twitter using the hashtag
I am LGBT.
I am LGBT.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
So great.
It's powerful.
Many of them may or may not be, but they're all identifying with us in this.
If there's going to be any plague, the rainbow plague sounds like the least threatening that I could think of.
Well, okay. Elsewhere, hopscotching around the globe. In Hamburg, they had pride, and a float for queer refugee support went up in flames. It halted the parade. I don't think there was anything untoward that happened, but it halted the parade of 200,000 for about an hour. There was some people suffered mild injuries.
Pride marches also took place last weekend in Belfast and Amsterdam to greet Acclaim. Lots and lots of people turned out. And I would say in the opposite, in terms of turnout, the Faroe Islands held their first Pride celebration. It's a self-governing territory in the Kingdom of Denmark. And the people there said, we didn't really need a Pride because everybody's equal here, but we're going to have one anyway. The entire string of 18 islands houses 51,000 people total population. 20 people checked they would go to the Pride March on the Facebook group, but it turned out to be a nice celebration, and perhaps they'll continue the tradition in future years.
In Norway, they're going to have the first Pride in Longyearbyen. That's the name of the place. It's set for population 2144. It's set for August 17th. It is the world's northernmost settlement. On the other hand, in Venezuela, where we're imposing new sanctions, but not for this reason, 4 actors in a satirical play about gay police officers were arrested and accused of ridiculing and usurping the functions of Venezuela's authorities. That doesn't sound very good.
It doesn't. And Venezuela also issued, in unrelated news, but also terrifying in a different way, they issued a travel warning against the U.S. following the shootings last week. They issued a travel
warning against us. Well, lots of places. I have friends who are very frightened to come here, and you should be.
Yeah.
In Montenegro, a bill to allow civil unions died in the parliament, with the ethnic minorities in the parliament voting against it. 71% of Montenegrins consider homosexuality an illness, but on the other hand, some other places in the former Yugoslavia, Croatia and Slovenia, have legalized same-sex unions.
Peru, the Lima Superior Court ordered the National Registry to register the marriage of a Peruvian same-sex couple who married in New York. It was the 3rd such couple who married in the United States, where same-sex marriage is obviously recognized.
Yes, and
to be recognized there.
We in New York started having same-sex marriage because people went to Canada or Massachusetts or Connecticut.
So hopefully
and came back here and were recognized.
Hopefully Peru's on its pathway to full recognition of marriage.
A new poll in Canada says now support for same-sex marriage is up to 2/3 of the people. So they've been having it there. They've had it nationwide since 2005.
An Australian official was fined after comparing the rainbow flag to the ISIS symbol. I love this about Australia.
We got a picture of this guy put up a flag in 2017 to celebrate same-sex marriage, right? This guy, Daniel Comensoli. There he is. He put up a flag. So talk about what happened.
So this Australian official who was living down the street said the rainbow flag was an affront to his personal beliefs, no better than a symbol of ISIS. Not only was he fined, but he had to issue an apology in the local newspaper.
I don't want to contradict you too much, but I think it was a she.
Oh, no, you're right. You're
Julie
right.
Passas.
You are right.
From the Liberal Party. Now, liberal there means conservative. Are you straight about that? It's the Liberal Party. It's the right-wing party. And she was fined $2,500 for homosexual vilification.
Yes.
It's a crime there.
Love it.
So be careful when you go to Australia. But she had said to this guy, she shouted at this guy, until you can breastfeed and have children, you shouldn't be able to marry. She also has to apologize in the newspaper for her harshness. Man, imagine if we could get Trump on this.
I know.
All right. Well, we have free speech here. We have free
frankly.
speech here. India's parliament passed a transgender rights bill. It seemed, by a voice vote, it seems to be better than the one that last year that the trans community didn't like. The stories are a little confusing, but it passed.
Yeah. I think the community was calling for a look at the full text of the bill because there were some questionable pieces of the last bill that was passed 2 years ago.
Now, what do you think about, we've talked about this, but, you know, Richard Grenell is the out gay ambassador from Donald Trump. Trump likes him in Germany. Mm-hmm. And so he hosted a meeting of LGBTI activists from around the world, including Stuart Milk of the Milk Foundation. Now, I have a bone to pick with Stuart because he allows Harvey Milk's image to be used on Russian vodka, you know, to get a fee, I guess. And, you know, of course, we've been dumping Russian vodka down the drain over here. But anyway, he was there, and people from other countries, including Botswana, were there. The guy from Botswana named Kane Youngman went to this meeting because, all right, so what Grenell says he's doing is we're going to fight for the decriminalization of homosexuality in the 77 countries that still criminalize that. Well,
worthy cause.
It would be nice if the U.S. government treated gay people decently, but they don't. So anyway, the guy from Botswana said, this is all well and good, but you got to stop sending your right-wing preachers to our country from America, fomenting homophobia. Now, the guy from the Washington Blade asked Kellyanne Conway about this whole thing, and she said, I don't have a comment on that.
Of course not.
From Trump. Okay.
No comment is never no comment.
Boris Johnson, the new UK Prime Minister, he's got a hideous cabinet, and he appointed Andrew Gilligan, an anti-trans conservative, as the transport advisor, no pun intended. He once said the trans activists must be secret double agents put there to damage their cause and alienate people. Thankfully, Boris Johnson is down to a one-vote majority in his coalition.
Plenty of damage to still cause there.
Yeah. Hungary, you got this?
I don't.
Okay. A senior politician of the ruling party there is calling for a boycott of Coca-Cola.
Ah, yes.
Over their pro-gay ads that were posted at a music festival that drew 500,000 people. The ads say, 0 sugar, 0 prejudice, and they show gay couples, lesbian couples, gay couples.
And unlike the Mets take note, Coca-Cola has doubled down on their advertising in support of LGBT people and couples.
And this was one minister in the government, and the official government line on this, well, we're not saying you shouldn't drink Coke. But the government is pretty antagonistic towards gay people. We're down to our last 5 minutes. Can we put up the picture of the Ecuadorian couple? Did we do that? No. You know, we've told you about them, but Pamela Troya and Gabriela Correa, who have been fighting to get married for 6 years, and they won the case. They did, and you know, they stood up for their rights, and they got them, and it was a joyous celebration. Okay, let's move on.
Worth mentioning that Caster Semenya continues to make headlines in the ongoing gender policing of sports, and it was determined that she's not going to be able to defend her world championship 800-meter race this fall because she refuses to take testosterone-reducing hormones.
Yeah, I mean, this is who she is naturally. I mean, you know, you're gonna handicap everybody in sports and say everybody's got to have the same testosterone level. It's kind of insane.
It absolutely is. It really is just the latest form of gender policing. And you know, if we're going to look at hormones, are we looking at chromosomes? Are we looking at internal body parts, external body parts? Right. What is the criteria by which someone is allowed to compete?
Her lawyer says the race isn't over until it's over. And the race is in September, the 800 meters.
Well, she is a winner in our book, regardless of where she's racing.
Very brave, very brave. All right, some entertainment news. I saw a couple of plays. Coriolanus is in the park. You know, I went to see this saying, God, I don't ever remember seeing Coriolanus, but I did see it with Ray Fiennes about 25 years ago. Anyway, it's at the Delacorte in the park. Directed by Daniel Sullivan. That's Jonathan Cake as the Roman general, and Kate Burton, wonderful actress, as the formidable Mother Volumnia, daughter of Richard Burton. It's one of his late tragedies. It's not one of his best plays, one of his two last plays. It's a good performance of this play, and you're out under the stars, and it's a wonderful time, and it's free. But it's very serious. It's battles and, you know, people fighting. And they played it for laughs sometimes when they shouldn't have. And I don't like when they do that. Dare to be serious when you're serious, including when, you know, Coriolanus is like bonding with the rival general and they're hugging. And, you know, there's a homoerotic implication. But they played it for laughs, and I don't think that's good. So don't do that. Anyway. And then, by the way, put up the other picture. I'm sitting there, and who is ushering at the theater? It's Justin Trudeau. No, it wasn't Justin Trudeau, but he looks so much like him. I had to take a picture of him.
He's making the rounds.
Because he was at a gay bar last week, right?
I know, so why not theater this week?
Right. Yeah. All right. And
switching gears over to television, Disney Channel star Joshua Rush came out as bi. He was actually the first character in a Disney movie, in a Disney TV show called Andy Mack, to play a gay character. And he came out on social. He wrote, "It's me, I'm bi. I stuffed the existential crisis of talking about my sexual orientation into a box in my mind for years. Today, I release it to the world."
You know, it remains, despite it being considered a liberal field, it's one of the harder places for people to come out because they don't want to get stereotyped. They want to play every role.
Absolutely. Look at our friend Kevin Spacey, right? I mean, actors who have not been able to come out.
He had plenty of opportunities to come out, and nobody would have cared. He only came out when he was caught dead to rights as a sexual harasser. But he's trying to make a comeback, and he appeared, got out from under his rock, and he read a very defensive poem at a museum in Rome next to a statue called The Boxer. That even put that picture back up again. Even the statue couldn't bear to look at him. Look, there it is. See, there it is. It's online. If you Google it, you'll see it.
Very curious to see what's next.
Okay. I also saw Moulin Rouge on Broadway. I like the movie, you know, with Nicole Kidman and Jim Broadbent and Ewan McGregor. So here we've got Karen Olivo and Aaron Tveit and great voice and Danny Burstein. It's super enjoyable. Especially the first half, which is very funny, where they use these snippets of songs. And Batwoman, we got 20 seconds.
Ruby Rose is worth more than 20 seconds, but CW11 this fall is coming out with Batwoman, starring Ruby Rose, and she's a lesbian.
It's great. So thank you for being with us, Allison.
Pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
This was great, you know, and we will see you next week.